Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol b'yado. I need a Megillah. You want it? Okay, ready, my friends? So, you're waiting with trepidation, huh? Okay. It's going to be fine. It's going to be good. So, my friends, good evening. Let's just make sure everyone's watching. Let's see who's online. If you are online, please say hi. You do what? You said hi? Hi. Okay, I wanted actually Megillah. Is there a Megillah there on my desk? If you go on my desk, there's a Megillah. There's a small little soft. Okay. So we got some people watching us online. Baruch Hashem. Hello. Hello. Kim's watching. Okay. Anyone else watching online? Art is watching. Shavua Tov. So tonight's learning is in the memory of Yitzchak, Tzvi, and Yosef. His neshama should have an elevation in Gan Eden. And also those who remember Candy Bronson. You know Candy Bronson? Her father passed away. If you know someone, send her a message. So learning will be in memory of her father. No, it's a pamphlet. It's like a soft cover. She goes the whole pile of books. And in the memory of Marsha Neville. Okay, anyway, ready? Hello, Karine. Hello, Lester. Anyone that's watching in the beautiful Northeast in the snow, hope we can warm. Perfect. Hope we can warm your spirits. Okay, thank you, Michelle. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mainitas, later on. Okay, are you ready? So last week we kind of left you with a cliffhanger, a little bit of a cliffhanger. And so without spending too much time repeating what we said last week, but just to remind us where we're holding, the first feast goes as much as Esther could have hoped for. She feels that it's not yet the time to actually reveal herself to the king and to tell the king who she is. She can tell that it's not yet the moment. And so she continues to wait for the right moment, trusting Hashem will make it work. But again, I don't want to spend too much time repeating what we said last week. The Talmud gives 12 reasons why she invited Haman to this first feast. She wanted to make the other guards jealous of him. She wanted to make Achashverosh jealous of him. She wanted to boost up his ego. We know that with evil, the more you bring them up, the harder the fall. Like a balloon, right? If you pop up air, if you put too much air into a balloon, what's going to happen? It's going to pop. And that's exactly what she did to Haman. She brings him up. She elevates his self-esteem. And of course, he pops. Good evening, Ravit. Good evening, Shira. Good evening, Nancy from Boston. So she inflates his ego. She wants God to be paying more attention. Many different explanations. But what's really most important to remember, and she wanted the Jews to stop relying on her. She wanted the Jews to say, "Oh, Esther, this self-hating Jew. Look at how she abandoned us, and she just, she jumped ship and joined forces with Haman. She invited Haman to the feast." And when they would realize that Esther couldn't help them, then they would really pray to Hashem, and that would really bring about their salvation. But the ultimate real discussion that we had last week. Hello, Luis is joining us. Hello, Linda. Good evening. But really, really, really is her objective over here. They're all true. So I said, Leo never said that they're all true. Is really she's trying to make the king jealous of Haman. And she does an excellent job. The first feast, where she invites them both as equals, and they're both sitting there, she, the queen herself, is personally serving wine to Achashverosh, and she's serving wine to Haman. And this does two things. It makes Haman super, super, super inflated. Why? Because he thinks that she's flirting with him because she wants him. She has a crush on him. And all of a sudden, this idea pops into the mind of Haman. They never dreamed of before even. That he wanted to kill the king already for a long time. But now not only was he going to assassinate the king and he would become the king, he would marry the queen. And of course, this is like the perfect clincher. If you have the queen on your side and the queen marries you, that's the ultimate of legitimacy and the ultimate, guarantee of the throne is to have the queen as your wife. And you have to remember, Haman did not come from royalty. Haman was not from he was not a local native. He came from Amalek. He was not part of the Persian Empire. He was not a natural Persian. And this is like the greatest opportunity he can imagine. And Esther, I'm sure, was not friends with him before. And all of a sudden he says, wow, even the queen notices that I've really made it to the top. And even the queen sees that her husband's a doofus and a moron and that I'm the future. And she's trying to impress me. And that's why she's invited me to the palace. And his ego went so high that up until that, and this is the key point here, that up until that point, Haman had been unbelievably calculated and thoughtful and methodical in every step of this very, very strategic plan, how he was going to destroy not only Mordechai, but to destroy all the Jews. The Megillah says clearly when he saw Mordechai not bowing down to him, he wanted to kill Mordechai. But he said, it's beneath my dignity to kill just Mordechai. The king won't agree. The king liked Mordechai. I'm going to have to kill all the Jews. This way I can also kill Mordechai. And so up until this first feast, he's patient, he's cunning and conniving, and he's not in a rush. He's doing things the right way. And we're going to see happens at this point in the story where Esther does something very, very dangerous. Esther, first of all, invites her greatest threat, her greatest enemy into her own private chambers for a private dinner. She also is making the king think that she and the Haman are in bed together. Take that however you want. Which, as we're going to see, could end up resulting in the king killing Haman and her. And she was willing to take that risk where she would be killed with Haman. As long as Haman is killed, it's already worth it. Which is, fascinating stuff. Good evening, everyone else is watching. It's Dana and Jeff, and Luis, and good evening, Yitzchak. Good evening, Joe. Good evening, Tom. And good evening, Murli. So Esther is ready to take this chance and to become associated with Haman. And so Haman is like floating high. I'm going to see how that ruins him. The king is also, let's stay with Haman. So what happens after the feast is over? The feast is over. This is kind of where we ended last week. Haman leaves the party on cloud 9. And who did he see right outside the palace? Mordechai. Now, Mordechai was not inside the palace because he was wearing sackcloth and ashes, but he was very curious to know what happened at this feast. So he's hanging around, waiting to hear what's going on. Everyone was talking about this feast. It was very strange. The king was invited to a private party with Haman. He's hanging around. And when Haman walks out, of course, everyone bows down to Haman except for Mordechai. And now Haman is filled with a rage that can't be contained. Because when you're planning, I don't like you, but there's a plan. But now he's so full of himself, he can't wait to kill Mordechai and all the Jews. He comes home, he says, this Mordechai Jew, I need to kill him now. So his advisors say, okay, let's build a gallows 50 cubits high. And I don't get distracted in the number 50, and there's many other parts of the story. But we're focusing on Queen Esther, but this is very important to the Queen Esther part. And that very night, he builds gallows for Mordechai, and he actually decides he can't even go to sleep. He decides to go back to the palace in the middle of the night to get permission from the king to go and kill Mordechai the very next day. This is going to be his downfall. And it's not written clearly in the Megillah, and you don't pay attention to this. But the only reason why this happens is because of how Esther was able to get into the mind of Haman. I don't know if the mind is the right word. To get into the ego and the heart of Haman to such an extent that his brain turned off. And all the logic and all the plan that he had so carefully done for years to build up to this position became reckless, threw it out the window, and this recklessness would cost him big time. I can tell you soon just how reckless he became and just how much it costed him. But let's go now to the other person at this private party, Achashverosh, who's full of jealousy, and Haman doesn't get it. Normally, Haman was very careful to keep track of how the king is doing, right? He was very careful to play the king, the puppeteer, and needs to know what the puppet, you have to keep track of, keep your eye on the puppet. When you're playing a game, keep your eye on the ball. Don't get distracted by the crowds cheering for you. That's the first rule of playing a game, right? Who coaches over here? Keep your eye on the ball. And now Haman he took his eye off the ball. And he didn't see the jealousy in Achashverosh's eyes. Esther did, but he didn't see it. He didn't see it. So the king goes to bed, and the king can't fall asleep. Why? Because the king is convinced that someone, perhaps Haman and the queen, are plotting to kill him. Now, of course, he's paranoid. That's what happens to dictators. But this is very strange to him. Why did Esther invite Haman? Why was she feeding him? Why was she dining him? Why was she flirting with him? And he begins to become afraid that Esther and Haman are planning to kill him. Who's going to protect him? So he starts telling himself, well, anyone in the palace would know about the plot. They come and tell me the reward would be tremendous. You know what I would do to reward a person and save my life? And then he starts thinking and says, hold on. What would I do? What have I done to reward someone that saved my life? Nothing. Has anyone ever saved my life and I rewarded them? Or has anyone ever saved my life and I didn't reward them? And that's why no one's coming forward, because he's thinking in the very transactional mindset that we're talking about money. People only come and save my life if they're going to get a paycheck. They're going to get a big bonus. Otherwise, they wouldn't save my life. And so he calls one of his guards to bring in the book of Chronicles and to start reading from him the book of Chronicles. Now, again, there's so many fascinating midrashim on this particular night. This is the night of Pesach, by the way. The night that he can't sleep is the first. Again, I told you different variations of the dates, but the general consensus is that this is the first night of Pesach. The Leil Shimurim, the night when God is watching over us. And Balayla Hahu, on that night when the king couldn't sleep, the ultimate king, the king of all kings, God Almighty, also couldn't sleep. Hashem couldn't sleep. And so when Haman, one of the guards, who were the guards taking care of the king at night? All henchmen and sons. Haman had many, many sons, probably many women, many sons, and many other loyalists. And they were the ones in charge of the king, taking care of it. So the Medrash says, and I can't not say the Medrash because it's so fascinating. Remember in the Gemara that he opened the book of Chronicles, and what page is it open to? The story when Big Son and Seresh tried to assassinate the king, and who discovered the plot? Mordechai. He told Esther. Esther told the king. And what was done to reward Mordechai? Nothing. That's the end of the story. The last thing that this son of Haman wants to read to the king is how Mordechai saved the king's life. So he turns to a different page. And the angel came and turned the page back. And each time he tries going to a different story and reading a different page, an angel keeps on turning the pages back to that page. And the king is getting very agitated. He was already in an agitated state. He starts screaming at this guard, the son of Haman, read the page you're on. And he had no choice but to read to him how Mordechai had saved the king's life. And now the king is worried because the king sees that he had saved someone's life and there had been no reward. So in his transactional mind, that means if there's another opportunity for someone to tell on Haman to him, and Haman's obviously very powerful, they're not going to take that risk because he's not going to do anything for them. He says, first thing in the morning, before my next party, because he's already afraid he's going to be assassinated tomorrow night. He starts to convince himself, this is like a setup and like a practice run. Tomorrow night they're going to kill me. So tomorrow, before the second party even, I have to reward anyone that saved me. So this way someone who knows anything will come and tell me before tomorrow night. At that moment, who comes to the palace in the middle of the night? Haman. That's the tune. That's how we sing it. He steps into his own trap. This is where he's already making mistakes, coming in the middle of the night to try and convince the king to kill somebody. And the king says, who's in the courtyard? Say, oh, Haman came in the middle of the night. Now, of course, that just set off more alarm bells. Because if you're already paranoid after this feast where Esther has been hanging out with Haman, very surprising because she's not married to Haman, and now Haman all of a sudden appears in the palace in the middle of the night when he should be home sleeping, that's very, very suspicious. Just bring him in. Haman comes in. Now, as I told you, if Haman was smart, now Haman was very smart. If Haman was thinking normally, clearly, calm-headedly, there's a better word than that, cool-headed, whatever, you know what I mean? If he was thinking properly, he would have immediately detected danger signs. Immediately. Achashverosh wasn't trying to hide it. He was agitated. He's in the middle of the night. He's in his pajamas. He's stressed out. Literally. But Haman was at such a feeling of high. His ego, Esther did such a good job. And this you have to realize, this is not in the text, but it's like, once you appreciate this, you can never read the story again, by the way. I promise you guys will never read the Megillah. You're going to hear the Megillah this year on purpose. It's going to be a whole different story. Esther did such a good job getting into his mind. He walks in oblivious to the fact he's walking into danger. And it's not because he wasn't a smart guy who knew how to read body language and knew how to read the tea leaves and knew how to read the room. He did. But he was so full of himself. So full of himself he couldn't see it. He walks in, and before there is a chance to ask anything about Mordechai and kill Mordechai in gallows, king says to him, there's someone in this kingdom that did me a great thing. I want to honor him. What should I do to honor this person? Now, again, if Haman was thinking normally, what would Haman have done? He would at least tried figuring it out. He would have said, what did he do? What did he deserve? Who is he? He would have asked, right? So maybe he would have asked, who? Or at the very least, good evening. At the very least, he would have like did a little questioning, But Haman is so full of himself. As the Megillah says, Haman says in his heart, who else could the king want to honor besides for me? Esther manipulated him so at his own game. And so he's so convinced that he's the person that the king wants to honor, it doesn't even enter his mind that it wouldn't be him. The thought didn't even enter his mind, because if it did, he would have been careful. He was a very careful, calculated, planning person. He goes full force. Must be me. And I want to read to you this verse. So he says, to the one you want to honor, you should bring to him. So he says to the king, the man that the king especially wants to honor, bring to them the royal robe that the king has worn, and the horse that the king himself has ridden on. And give him the royal crown on his head. Let him go like a king. At the moment he said that, even Haman realized he went too far. Doesn't say it in the text. All you see in the text, the only hint is the next verse. The next verse says, because here he asks for the robes of the king, the horse of the king, and the crown of the king. The very next verse, he says, then let the robe and the horse be entrusted to one of the king's most noble officers, and let them attire the man whom the king especially wants to honor, and parade him on horseback through the city, proclaiming, thus shall be done to the man whom the king wishes to honor. You'll notice by the very next verse, the crown is no longer part of the request. Verse number 8, give him the clothing of the king, the horse of the king, the crown of the king. And even Haman, in a state of inflated ego, sees just how triggering that was to Achashverosh. Because imagine you're Achashverosh, and you think someone wants to kill you. And all of a sudden, your missus, give this man you want to honor the crown. Let them parade through the town, through the city, wearing the crown of the king. That's like major fire, what's it called? Red Code 5, whatever. Alarm bells, fire alarms. And even Haman realized that. He went too far. But he still doesn't think that it's not him. You understand? That's how full he is. Even he realizes I went too far, and I should not have said, give this man the king's crown, because no one wears a crown besides for the king. He still doesn't take it back. He says, okay, just give him the clothing of the king and the horse of the king, and let him be taken through the town by the second most important nobleman or minister of the king's palace. Who is the second most important minister? Mordechai. And so in his mind is so sure that he's number one, and then now this will force Mordechai to take him on the ride. He says, let him take him, thus shall be done to the king wishes honor. You have to imagine the absolute shock that Haman must have experienced when the king says in the very next verse, Haman, that's a great idea. Maher, quickly. To take the clothing and the horse, like you said, and do so for Mordechai the Jew, the one who is sitting Bishar Melech, sitting at the gate to the king. Don't miss anything from what I told you to do. Now, the rabbis explained to us, why does he have to specify which Mordechai? The Jewish Mordechai, the one by the gate. We said Mordechai, Mordechai? You mean which Mordechai? I know a lot of Mordechai. Maybe Mordechai, I don't know, Mordechai Goldstein, who lives, No. Mordechai the Jew. You mean there's a lot of Jewish Mordechais? No, the one at the gate, that Mordechai. And so then Haman says, maybe you shouldn't give him the horse of the king. It might not be so respectful. On second thought, I'm thinking maybe we should only give him regular clothing, not the king. And the king says, no, whatever you said. I like your idea. Whatever you said, because the king already realized, Haman thought it was him. The king realized it. Do it exactly to Mordechai. I want to be honored exactly as you said. Do it right away. And he wanted to push it off. And the king says, no. The king is urgent. Why is the king feeling urgency? because he's worried about having this done before the second feast. So this has to happen ASAP, first thing in the morning. Maher, he tells him, quickly go, take the clothing, and go right now, take my royal robes, take my horse from the barn. You yourself need to do everything that you just said should be done to the man I want to honor. And you will be the one, personally, as my representative, to show the honor. You will be my representative to lead him through the streets, declaring for everyone to see, thus shall be done to the man whom the king wishes honor. Now, obviously, Haman understood now is not the time to ask about the gallows to hang Mordechai. That it wasn't going to go over very well. Right after the king just said, go take Mordechai on the royal parade, where you're going to be the one walking in front of him, telling the whole city, that shall be done to the man whom the king wishes honor. Haman realizes he went too far, but there's nothing he could do about it. Now, Esther finds out immediately what's going to happen. You know what Esther does? Esther, who obviously, I don't know if she had her own spies or she just heard from the king, told her, or however she knew, before Haman get a chance to take Mordechai to the bar. But remember, Mordechai had been fasting for 3 days. This is the day of Pesach now. He's been fasting since the third day of the fast, according to the way we're going to say the story. The third day of the fast, and he hasn't eaten, he hasn't showered, he hasn't bathed. He needs to give a haircut before he can put on the king's clothing and all that. He need to be groomed. She sends an order that all the stores, all the bathhouses, and all the barber shops in the city should be closed in honor of the parade. And she sent a royal guard in the city of Shushan. No barber shop is open. So finally, Haman is not running to do this. He brings the clothing, and Mordechai is sitting there with ash cloths, with sackcloth and ashes on his head. He needs to be bathed. He needs to be dressed. He needs to be groomed and have a haircut. And all the barber shops are closed. So Mordechai says to Haman, you were a barber back in the good old day, which he was. Haman had been a barber for many years before he became the viceroy of Persia. You can give me a haircut. And Mordechai is Haman is forced to give a haircut and to bathe and to dress Mordechai. And now Mordechai has to get up on top of the horse. Now remember, Mordechai has been fasting. Mordechai is very weak, so he can't climb up the horse. So Mordechai says to Haman, get down on your hands and knees, and I'll climb on top of you, and I'll get on top of the horse. So he goes up, and actually, again, I'm getting distracted with the detail, but it's so beautiful. So as he's climbing up, Mordechai kicked him, gave him a good zet. So Haman, on the floor, says to Mordechai, doesn't it say in the Torah not to rejoice over the downfall of your enemies? It's a verse. It's a beautiful Talmud. Not to rejoice over the downfall of your enemies. So Mordechai says, yeah, that's about the Jewish enemy. Non-Jew, it says on their high places you will tread. So I'm fulfilling the verse. It said I will tread on the high places of the enemies of the Jewish people. Anyway, they start the parade. I don't want to spend too much because I still have a whole other party to talk about. And then what I really want to talk about, which is the aftermath and what she does for the future. But anyway, so they go on this whole parade. And one other very, very interesting detail, which is also a little bit relevant to the party, as they're going through the town, Mordechai's head is down because he's fasting. He's weak. Haman's head is down because he's embarrassed. He's ashamed. And as he's walking through, thus shall be done to the man whom the king wishes honor. And the whole city came out because Esther shut all the stores. It wasn't a snow day, it was a parade day. And all the stores are closed, and everyone is lined in the streets of Shushan for this parade. She gave a whole route. The parade passes by the house of Haman. And before I tell you what happened next, say good evening, Jario and Maria and Carmen and Joseph and Alice and Mario and Bonnie. Thank you all for joining us, saying hello online. The parade passes by the house of Haman. At that time, Haman's daughter, perhaps the same daughter he wanted to marry, Achashverosh, I don't know, comes out to the porch or the balcony to see the parade. Now, all she sees is someone dressed in the king's clothing, on top of the king's horse, being led by someone else who's like his head bent over, and she can't see who's who from her position on the balcony, but she, like her egotistical father, assumes that who's the one being honored here? Haman. And who's the one leading the horse? Mordechai. And she was cleaning out the toilet. Those toilets didn't flush. It was just a bucket in the house. It was like a little bucket. And she takes a bucket of human recycling and dumps it on the head of the person leading the procession. Haman is walking, saying, thou shall be done to the man and the king. And all of a sudden, splat on his head. Okay, listen to what happens next. It gets worse. The story gets worse. It's in the Gemara. It's in the Gemara. It's a famous story. I grew up my childhood really knowing the story. Yeah. But Haman's daughter was so excited to see of course it was disrespectful, but I don't think she really cared about the respect. She was so excited to add to the embarrassment of Mordechai. She throws this bucket of stuff from the house of human recycling onto the head of the person leading the parade. And Haman looks up to see who did this to him. And he looks up, and what does he see? His daughter standing there gleefully holding the bucket. And when he sees her, I don't know what his eyes looked like, but she realized, ooh, boy, I am going to be in trouble tonight. You know what she did? She jumped from the balcony and committed suicide in front of her father. Yeah. And so not only is Haman having this terrible day where he's leading his enemy on the horse of the king, in the clothing of the king, he just saw his daughter dump recycling on his head, and then excrement, waste, human waste, and then not recycling like clean glass bottles, and then cardboard, and then jump off the balcony. Anyway, story gets worse. He finally finishes the parade. It was a whole day parade. Esther made sure of it. Now, Esther also knew that she cannot allow Haman to have any time to re-strategize. Because if he would have had time to re-strategize and have a meeting with his advisors, they would have told him two things. First of all, they would have told him Esther is Jewish. Because by now it's pretty obvious. She was the one that had closed all the stores in the city. It was her orders, her guards. Now, Haman may or may not have known that. He was too busy getting the stuff. But he had spies. Haman had his own spies. And by now they would have told him Esther was the one to make sure that everyone came out. And Esther had guards positioned. Like, that was a tell. At this point, if he would have a chance to be with his spies, he would know she was Jewish. Although he would find out soon enough anyway. But at this point, he doesn't realize that Esther's behind everything. Second thing, you know he would have done? He would have taken down the gallows he built last night, leaving the gallows up to hang Mordechai on after he just finished the parade to honor Mordechai is a very bad idea. Very, very bad idea. And you're going to soon see how bad of an idea it was, but he had no time to plan. He had no time to do anything. He comes home, and he actually starts to have a meeting with his advisors and his wife, Zeresh, even before he changes. He also knew, Haman also knew, exactly what Esther knew, that he must have an ASAP emergency meeting. That was even more important than taking off his dirty clothing. And as he's sitting down to this meeting, Esther knew that he shouldn't have time to have a meeting. Esther sends guards and says, rush him. He must come right away without delay. Do not give him a chance to talk. Do not give him a chance to change. And now these guards come, led by Charvona. And Charvona, you should know, was one of Haman's buddies. He was on the side of Haman, but not because he believed in Haman, but because he was an opportunist. But the guards had become jealous of Haman, sorry. The guards had become jealous, which was one of the many reasons why Esther had invited Haman to the feast. And so the guards now saw a chance to see Haman being bad, because Haman walked around all day with his nose 4 feet high in the air, the broomstick up, whatever, making everyone bow down to him. They didn't like that. Now he was invited to the private party of the king and the queen. So now a chance to see Haman a little embarrassed. It was good. The guards were happy to see him brought to the palace in dirty clothing, stinking like a toilet. And he was brought to the palace just like that. So Haman comes into the second party. And that's where we're holding now, the second party. Jillian says she never heard this version before. That's correct. That's why you come to learn. There's so much you've never heard. Yeah, this is what they did not teach you in Hebrew school, I promise you. Now, anyway, you come to the second party. They come. Now, again, you have to understand everyone's mood. Esther, from what I read, ate before this, even though it's the end of the third day. So at the end of the third day, she's already eaten before this party. So she have a clear head to be able to communicate. She's not fasting anymore, but she's not drinking wine. However, she's busy feeding wine to both Haman and to Achashverosh. And again, she invited them. If you remember the day before, the language she used, she invited them as equals. She told them, I'm inviting both of you together. It wasn't like I'm inviting you and also you can come with the king. It was like two coming, like a couple coming together. So Achashverosh even though he had honored Mordechai, is very, very agitated. He's nervous. He's suspicious. He's jealous. He's on pins and needles. He's very nervous. And Haman is very, very nervous. Something is not going to the plan. He had never been so humiliated in his entire life. He's very agitated, very nervous. So what's their coping mechanism? Drink. Very good. So they're both drinking. She's pouring the wine, they're both drinking, and they're both like silent, and they're each like fuming in their own way. It's I can imagine, this I'm not saying from the text, but just if you visualize the scene, it's very tense. Very tense. No one in the room trusts anybody. Everyone's angry. And finally, the king is impatient. He says to Esther, you called me here for a second night. What do you want? Until half the kingdom, this say us, and I will do it. And here's a key word. It's a one-word difference. But in the first time, when he said to the queen, what do you want? Ask for up to half the kingdom, and I will give it to you. Here's giving up I ask up to half the kingdom, and I will do it. There's already a difference. It's a small nuance. And these are things only the rabbis point out, these one-word differences. In English, it's almost, I will give it or I will do it. But the difference in giving you something and doing something for you is big. And Esther, that moment, saw, time is here. Time is here. This is my sign. I said to the king, remember I promised you, I will reveal, and if you remember also, she had told the king the first night that tomorrow night, I'll reveal to you my identity. Right? That's what she had promised, which is part of what he got jealous. Why is he inviting Haman to a party with, this is not a, in the beginning, he thought, why is she inviting Haman? Because if she wants money, if she wants territory, if she wants an island, she wants who's going to make it happen? My chief of staff. So she's inviting him for technical, expediency. But now when she told him, tomorrow I'm going to tell you who I am and give you what you've been most desperate for so many years, to find out my identity that you've never, ever told me. And Esther had kept her identity secret for so many years. Even though he did so many things, he made a second contest, and he repealed the taxes, and so many things I told you in the first lesson, to try and figure out who she was. And so she says to the king as follows. She says to the king, I would have been quiet. However, I no longer can. Why? If I have found favor in your eyes, please give me my soul as my request. Va'ami b'vakashasi, and my nation as my petition to you. Kinimkarnu ani va'ami, because I and my people, we've been sold to be taken. One second, I just lost this thing. We have been sold to be taken away as if we've been sold as slaves. I'll be quiet. But we're not being sold as slaves for financial benefit. Rather, we're being designated for absolute obliteration, for I and my people to be destroyed, slain, and annihilated. That's what she says to him. And the king Achashverosh responds to her, he says to her, Mihu zeh v'ezehu. The tune is beautiful. Mihu zeh v'ezehu. Who is this person? Ashamolali boy, Lasses Cain. Who is this person that has filled his heart to do this to my queen, to destroy my queen's people? Now, what kind of question is that? He had given his ring to Haman to kill all the Jewish people. So first of all, it means he hasn't really chapped that she's Jewish. But also the rabbis explaining, and there's different opinions how to understand this, that Achashverosh literally, honestly, did not even know what Haman had done. Haman had only come to the Achashverosh. If you remember earlier on, he came and said, there's a nation, they're different than everybody else, and they don't keep the same laws, and they're different people, and they stick out like a sore thumb. We need to do something about them. So what did Achashverosh say to Haman? Here's the ring, and do to them as is good in your eyes. Now, he didn't imagine that Haman was actually going to just annihilate his entire people in his kingdom. He thought he would tax them, he'll sell them as slaves, make more money out of it, whatever. Slave labor, maybe, to just annihilate an entire nation, didn't enter Achashverosh's mind. Who does that? Normal people don't do that. So he has thought, you want money to, here, don't worry about the money. You have my ring, and you can do to the Jews, Katoiv be'inayach, as is good in your own eyes. And Haman had sent out actually 2 decrees. One was to prepare for the 13th of Adar for a war, and the second decree that the king had, once he had the ring of the king, he sent out another secret decree that only Haman, if you remember, told Mordechai, because Aliyah never showed it to him, but it was not public, in which he had already planned the 13th of Adar, where they would find out later that the 13th of Adar was the day of annihilation for the Jewish people, which means that the king himself didn't even know that this was going to happen. That's how secretive Haman was keeping his plan, that even the king didn't know what had been sealed into law with his ring. That's how much control Haman had over him. He just knew he was going to tell him about the Jewish people, didn't know what he was going to do. And the people, all the ministers and governors getting these decrees of the 13th of Adar didn't know yet that it was the Jewish people that were going to be annihilated on that day. So he says to the queen, who is this person that wants to do this? So she says, Ish tsar v'oyev, a very wicked man. And the Gemara says that at that moment Esther was going to say the truth. And the truth is that who wanted to kill the Jewish people? Not only Haman, but also Achashverosh. And the angel came and turned her finger. That was going to go towards Achashverosh. And the angel turned her finger toward Haman. And she says, a wicked man, Ish tsar v'oyev, an adversary and an enemy. Haman, this wicked man, Haman. Boo. Now, by the way, I forgot to say, before, and what's the next words? V'haman nivas b'lefnei hamelech v'hamalkot. Haman trembled in terror before the king and the queen. He was totally caught off guard. V'haman nivas. Haman was trembling in terror. This caught him off guard. Which, again, is only because he was so full of himself. And I did have a chance. He was so discombobulated from the high of last night to the low of sitting there. He thought it couldn't get any worse. Being forced like Mordechai in the parade, having my daughter throw stuff on my head, coming to a feast, and now finding out that Esther is a Jew. Haman nivas. Haman's trembling. He was like, he didn't know. He didn't know what to do, where to go. He's like, blah, 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 blah. He was at a loss of words. Haman was not usually a man at a loss of words. Haman is trembling in terror. So says the Megillah. Haman nivas. Before the king and the queen, he's trembling, doesn't know what to say. And that moment, this is not written in the text, but this is what the rabbis tell us. Esther starts to launch into a tirade to tell the king about all the crimes that Haman has done. You think Haman only wants to kill me? Haman wants to kill you. She tells him. Haman's tried it many times. Who's the one that gave advice to kill Vashti? Haman was a young advisor. His name was Memucham back then. He was the one that had your wife killed. Haman was involved in the plot of Bigson and Seresh. He was involved in that plot. Haman was plotting now to kill you. He wanted your king, your crown. And the more she says to Achashverosh about Haman, the more angry Haman is getting, Achashverosh is getting, and the more discombobulated Haman is getting. And then she tells Haman, Achashverosh, I am a Jew. I'm not just a Jew. I'm a granddaughter or great-great-great-granddaughter of King Shaul, of King Saul. The very first Jewish king was her great-great-great-grandfather. She's a descendant of that. And all of a sudden, he realizes he's married to royalty. And also it explains, he realizes that his son, Darius, that had already been born, is a Jew, which takes away his whole hatred of the Jews. Because you have to understand, I don't go into this too long right now. I could do a whole class on this. The Rebbe talks about this. The anti-Semitism of Haman is not the same as the anti-Semitism of Achashverosh. Achashverosh, anti-Semitism is because he's afraid that a Jewish king will take over my kingdom and all that. And now he finds out my wife is a Jew. Oh, my best friend's a Jew, right? And all of a sudden he realizes my son is Jewish. That's the future. And his anger dissipates. He's no longer wants to kill the Jews. But on the other hand, kill Haman. You have to recognize Achashverosh is deeply, deeply dependent on Haman. Haman ran everything. Haman was like, if Haman was killed, he wouldn't know what to do. He wouldn't know his whole kingdom would fall apart. So on one hand, he's not angry at Esther. He's not angry at the Jews. He's very angry at Haman. What's he going to do? He's trapped. He's dependent on Haman. Now, Haman is basically silent. Esther is going on and on how wicked Haman is. And the more she talks about how wicked Haman is, the more angry he gets, until his teeth were once again grinding in anger. And Haman and Achashverosh can't handle the rage. And you remember he was drunk. He drank a lot of wine. He storms out of the room. He couldn't handle it. He literally couldn't be in there anymore. He just storms out of the room to go into the garden. Try and calm down. Figure out what to do. He goes to the garden. Imagine says that along came angels disguised as henchmen of Haman. And they start chopping down trees in this garden. He says, what are you chopping down trees in my garden? I'm trying to relax and they're chopping down trees. So these angels dressed as workers of Haman say, Haman sent us to chop down these trees for gallows that he's building. Chop down my trees in my garden. He gets even angrier. And then also he realizes he made a big mistake. He left Haman alone in the room with Esther. Yeah, he wasn't so smart. He was angry. So he stormed out of the room because he couldn't handle it. Also, he realizes Haman is alone in the room with Esther. This is dangerous. And he doesn't even know who to believe. Is she part with Haman? Is she Haman against her? Because you have to realize, Achashverosh is very, very confused. Up until the moment that she said, I'm a Jew, he was convinced that Haman and Esther are plotting together to kill him. Now, he finds out Esther's a Jew, and Haman, according to her version, is trying to kill Esther, trying to kill the queen, just like he killed Vashti. So, and hold on. Haman wants to kill the queen, and I just walked out of the room and left the queen alone in the room, which you should have thought about before. So he runs back into the room. At the moment that he runs back into the room, you notice this in the Megillah? First it says the king got up, he went out of the garden, and then he came back in. He returns from the garden to the base of Mishteh Hayayin, to the home where they were drinking the wine. The Haman Neifel al Hamita Asher Esther Alal. And Haman falls on top of the bed that Esther's on. He attacks her. He falls on top of her. I'll explain to you different versions in a second. And this king, and basically he walks into the room, and Esther's lying on the couch, on the bed, and Haman is on top of her, on the couch. Or they ate like on beds, whatever, they're on the couch. And Esther is screaming, save me, save me. Esther thinks she might be killed or raped. And Esther is screaming for someone save me. He walks into the room and he sees Haman on top of Esther, and she's screaming for help. Very dramatic scene. He's also a little after wine. He says, Hagam likbushes hamalka imi baboyes. Would you be trying to take my wife with me in the house? One thing, you're conspiring behind my back. Her, you're trying to rape her and have an affair with her in front of me in the house? And yet, you know what's fascinating? Well, before I get to what's fascinating, why was Haman on top of her? So it brings two explanations. The classic in the Gemara is that Haman realized his life is in danger. And so Haman gets up, when the king walks out, he gets out, comes before Esther to bow down before her and to plead with Esther to save his life. Only such a narcissistic, conniving lowlife would think that he could convince Esther, play on her Jewish rachmanis, her Jewish compassion, to forgive him and not to have him killed. He starts begging her, let's figure it out. I'm going to make it right to the Jews. I won't kill the Jews. Please save my life. And at the moment that the king walked back in, an angel came and pushes him onto Esther. And the door opens. An angel pushed Haman. And Haman ends up on top of Esther. And she's screaming. Before she has a chance to get off of her, so the king walks in. That's why he thinks he's trying to rape her. The other explanation, which is not the Medrash, but I heard that Haman realized he's going down. Haman said, if I go down, I'm going to take Esther down with me. He wasn't thinking cold, like, how do I save myself? At this point, he was thinking just fight. He said, I'm going to at least, if I'm going to die, violate Esther, make a scene out of it. Let it be known, not that I was killed for trying to attack the Jews, but let it become known that there was a private affair going on. Let people think I was killed because I was having an affair with the queen. Understand? So it could be a desperation. It's also very smart. Try and change the narrative over here. That if he's killed because he was intimate with the queen in the king's house, okay, so I understand why he got killed. I understand where he got kind of say he got killed because the Jews killed him because he was trying to kill the Jews. That's much worse. So he's trying to change the narrative. What's fascinating is, if you read the Megillah, even after the king says, Hagam likbesh es hamalka imi babayis, will you try to conquer the wife, or rape my wife with me in the house? They covered the face of Haman. They grabbed, the guards came. They pulled Haman off of Esther, and they covered his face. The king had not yet decided to kill Haman. I want you to pay attention to this. The lousy husband is right. Lousy husband. Third didn't even see his wife. He still does not yet say kill Haman. Pnei Haman chafu. The face of Haman is covered while the king says, I need to figure this out. That moment comes along Heroine. Charvaina is this agent of Haman. Now Charvaina is remembered for good because he saved the Jewish people, but he was had a self-serving agenda. But Charvaina already saw that things had changed and that the kid Haman is no longer on the rise. So Charvaina says that's not the only thing he did. Gam hinei ha'et asher asa Haman leMordechai. There's also a tree outside, a gallows, 50 cubits high, that he made for Mordechai. Asher dibertov HaMelech, the one that had spoken good about the king, the one that had saved the king's life, the one that was honored today by the king. He built a gallows to hang this man that you just honored. And in fact, look out the window. It's standing there in Haman's backyard right now, 50 amos high. And only after Achashverosh sees the gallows that Haman made for Mordechai, the king says, hang him upon it. He should hang on the gallows he built for the one I want to honor. Which is a fascinating thing. Fascinating. Chassidus talks about the idea of the king, whatever, but I don't want to go distracted. Haman, they hang Haman on the tree that he prepared for Mordechai. Now the king's anger abated. So first of all, this is the ultimate idea of Purim, is the idea of the transformation, that not just Haman was killed. He was hung on the very gallows that he had built for Mordechai. That's the gallows that he was hung on. It's that we do somersaults, the idea of transformation, the idea that what he had built to destroy Mordechai, that became his downfall. And it all started from the first feast, from when Esther invited him, and she built up his ego, and she inflated and made it full of himself. That's when they made the mistake of building the gallows. And that building of the gallows, 50 cubits high, which is a very important number in Kabbalah, but we're not going to talk about it now, is what made him have his downfall, that he had it hung on those very gallows. Now, the story's not over, my friends. Okay? The drama of the second feast is over, but the story is not over. But, okay. What happens? Haman's hung on the gallows. And his body's hanging there. And Esther set out a rule that no one can take him down. And for many, many months, Haman's body is hanging on this gallows. And in fact, people come to Esther and say, isn't there a law in the Torah that you're not allowed to leave a body hanging overnight? And she says, no, it's good. She keeps it there. She refuses to allow his body to be taken down, because this was he wanted to be killed. Even in those days, there were different methods of killing. When the king was angry at you and wanted to execute you, there were higher forms of execution, lower forms. Higher form was being beheaded. That's more like a quick death, like firing squad, so to say. Fire, but execution. Hanging was for criminals. Hanging was a sign of you did something wrong. That it should be a public sign of don't be a criminal with this guy, or else you're going to end up hanging from the gallows. So only the worst criminals, the worst sinners, were killed by hanging. So Haman was hoping to be executed. Here he was hung on the gallows, which was a very ignoble death. He hung there for many, many months. Okay. But now let's pay attention to a few things. First of all, Achashverosh did not kill Haman because he loved Esther. She said he was not such a great husband. Or because he loved the Jewish people. What finally put him over the edge? He realized I need to kill Haman for my own self-preservation, because he's trying to make gallows to hang my own advisors on and all that. So that's why he kills Haman. Secondly, the decree against the Jewish people was still standing. Even though Haman had been killed, the Purim story is not over. There is still a decree that has already been signed into law by the king's signet ring, saying that all of the Jewish people are to be killed in 11 months from now. Now, the king just found out about this. But the king is very upset. The king is in a very, and Mordechai and Esther make a decision not to talk to the king about it. They make a decision to wait. Why did they make a decision to wait? First of all, most of the provinces hadn't even gotten the first decree yet. This whole story happens in a matter of 3 days. From when the decree was signed, Mordechai got it right away from Elijah the prophet. 3 days later, this whole story happened. People lived 127 provinces. It takes time to travel. It's like you had an email back then. You send out a WhatsApp message and everyone gets it 2 minutes later. They have to get on a horse and a wagon and travel. It takes time. So many provinces hadn't even gotten the first message. And how would it look if you get the first message, and you get two different decrees from the king. Okay, I got this decree, I got this decree. I can choose which one. Kill the Jews, don't kill the Jews. Like many of the nations were very, very anti-Semitic. We have to realize this wasn't just like Haman was a Jew hater and Achashverosh was a Jew hater, but the Jews were loved by the people. Anti-Semitism in Persia was very, very high. There have been a lot, Haman did a lot to provoke it and to normalize it and to make it, so to say, mainstream, as we would call it today. Anti-Semitism was a mainstream, socially acceptable method of, just like it is today, unfortunately. And many people were very happy to kill the Jews. And in fact, when the first decree comes out saying the Jews should be killed, many people didn't wait. And they already immediately start to kill Jews. And more importantly, they start to steal the wealth of the Jews and to appropriate their property and to do pogroms already right away. It was a very, very dark time. Now the king is... So in the meantime, the king says to Esther, the property of Achashverosh, of Haman, is now state property. Whenever a person was killed as a criminal, their property was appropriated by the government, by the state. So Achashverosh gets all of this wealth. Now, Achashverosh is very worried about his own personal image, right? That's all that matters to him. How are they going to look? He killed Haman. He wants people to know that Esther is still loyal to him. Because already rumors are going around, which is exactly what Haman wanted. When Haman fell on top of Esther, the people should say that Haman and Esther were doing something behind the king's back. So the king had to dispel those rumors. There was no affair with Haman and his wife, and that's not why he killed Haman. So what does he do? He takes all the wealth of the house of Esther, all the wealth of the house of Haman, and he gives it to Esther as a gift. And by giving the wealth of Haman's house to Esther as a gift, this sends a clear signal that there was no private affair going on between Haman and Esther, because the last thing he would do is give Haman's wealth to Esther if that's what he was trying to hide by having killed Haman. Now Esther, what is she going to do with this wealth? She doesn't want the wealth. She wants to give it to Mordechai. The problem is you can't gift the king's gift to somebody else. That wouldn't go over very well, right? Thanks for the gift, now I'm going to give it to you. That wouldn't. So she makes, it's her money, but she makes Mordechai the manager of the estate. And Mordechai, what does he do with his money? He used the money to reimburse all the Jews that had been attacked by anti-Semites, that had been lost money or had been vandalized, etc. During this time, they were able to come get reimbursement for their anti-Semitic incidents from the wealth of the house of Haman. Another vinahapechu, another transformation that took place where the money of Haman's house was being used to reimburse people that have been damaged as a result of the anti-Semitism that Haman had helped normalize and publicize. Other opinions say he used the wealth to build schools for this, but this was a beautiful thing. Okay. Now, as I tell the Jewish people, we're going to make a day of celebration. If you read the Megillah, you read the Megillah. They the 13th of Adar came. They sent out a new decree. They decided they couldn't annul the first decree because once they couldn't, and once Mordechai and Esther, once that decree was out, people could decide, I'm going to keep it. Let's not say another decree, it's annulled. I know the first decree. So now you have two decrees. One says kill the Jews, one says don't kill the Jews. Which one? So instead they decided to leave the first decree standing. And they made a second decree that said that the Jews can fight back. That was the Jews can fight back. And that the government, the army would help the Jews. The official government support would be behind the Jews. So now all those that have been preparing to go and kill the Jews, that had openly exposed themselves as Jew haters, were now targeted. And the Jews, with the help of the army, came and killed them. And if you read through the Megillah describes the numbers of haters that were killed. For all those that think we shouldn't fight our enemies and kill those in Hamas and Iran, etc., that fight against the Jews, read the Megillah, and you'll see the numbers of people that were killed are tremendous. They send us the decree. And on one day, on the 30th of Adar, they killed, I'll find you the exact numbers. Where is it over here? They organized themselves and in camp, they had 500 men, as well as the 10th of Haman. Whatever, I don't see the number here. Many, many thousands of people were killed, all those that had been fighting against the Jewish people, whatever it is. But that's what I wanted to talk about. So Esther, obviously everyone's celebrating, right? Esther realizes something very, very important. So I want to end off with this very important point. Very important point. Which is really 2 points. It's 1 point with 2 parts. That if the Jewish people are going to forget the miracles that happened, and they're not going to make it into a formal celebration for the future, they'll once again, they'll forget. Like many of the miracles that happened to us that have been forgotten over time. And so Esther then makes it a rule that on this day, that there should be continuous celebration, etc. And she sends out a decree to everyone that on the days of Purim should be days that should be remembered and celebrated by every single generation, every family, in every province, every city. And these days of Purim should never cease among the Jews, nor should their remembrance perish from their descendants. Okay? So the first year, everyone said it was a tremendous miracle. The next year, they made a big party. We're going to make a celebration, and they made feasts and celebration. But then Esther said, this has to be forever. Never, ever to be forgotten to celebrate the miracle that happened. In fact, even when Mashiach comes and the other holidays will be nullified, the holiday of Purim will never, ever be nullified. As it says in the Megillah, V'zichram Yosef Mizarim, that the remembrance will never perish from the descendants of the Jewish people. Now, she established this, her and Mordechai together, and the Jews accepted it. And the Kiblu HaYehudim, the Jewish people accepted upon themselves, the Alzarim, and they accepted upon their children, and on all the future generations that will come after them, not to transgress this, to observe these days of celebration without fail in the manner prescribed at the proper time each year. But then, so again, we have a holiday. But then, Esther Hamalka bas Avichayil, Esther the queen, the daughter of Avichayil, and Mordechai the Jew, they wrote down with the full authority to ratify the second letter of Purim, and dispatches were sent to all 100 and to the Jews in all 127 provinces of the kingdom of Achashverosh with words of peace and truth to establish the Kayim Es Yemei HaPurim Ha'eleh, to establish these days of Purim and their proper dates, just as Mordechai the Jew and Queen Esther had enjoined them, and as they had undertook upon themselves and their future generation, their posterity, the matter of the fasts and the lamentations and the celebrations, etc. Meaning, she sent out a royal decree that these holidays should be celebrated, the fast of Esther. 2 things: to remember how we cried to Hashem, to remember how we were desperate for salvation and we cried, and to remember how we were saved miraculously, etc. Okay? The words of Esther were established, they were validated, and it was recorded in the book. Hence, you would think that's how we have the book of Megillah. Megillah says the book of Esther because she wrote it. Not so simple. When Esther comes to the rabbis, she says to the men, so let me just finish a little of the story. 3 years, Mordechai becomes a full-fledged advisor to the king. He becomes the most important advisor to the king. He becomes very, very effectively running the government. And some of the rabbis are actually upset why Mordechai remains in the palace. Now that the decree is over, he should go to study Torah, but whatever, it's not for right now. This is because of Esther, not Mordechai. And 2 years later, Achashverosh passes away. And Darius II, the child of Achashverosh and Esther, becomes a king at a very, very young age. Really, who's running the kingdom? Esther and Mordechai. Esther's running it through the name of her son, and they make a rule that the Jews could go back to the land of Israel and have permission to return to their homeland and to begin to build the second base of Mikdash, which indeed is done. The discussion that Mordechai left and didn't leave. In the book of Nehemiah says that Mordechai did leave and left Persia, went back to Israel. Regardless, they start to rebuild the second base of Mikdash. And they make a Sanhedrin, they make an Anshei Knesset Agdola, the men of the Great Assembly, who are ratifying the books of Tanakh. They're the ones who have the authority to make a book, in English it's called to canonize it. Which means to make it, there's many books of Jewish writings. We have the book of the Maccabees. It's not part of Tanakh. The book of the Maccabees is not part of Tanakh. And Esther sends a message to the men of the Great Assembly, to the Anshei Knesset Agdola, that she wants her Megillah that she wrote to become part of Tanakh. You know what the rabbi said? No. The rabbis. How did you guess, Michelle? That's such a strong. Achashverosh. Darius II, and Darius II, or Daryavish in Hebrew, he becomes a new king of the entire Persian Empire. Mordechai helps him rule. Esther is really running the country through her son, and Darius makes a decree that the Jewish people could return. And by the way, when the Jewish people return, now 2 years later, the king dies. The third year, the first year of the new king, this third year after the story of Purim is the 70th year from the year that the Beis Hamikdash is actually destroyed. And so, indeed, from when the temple is destroyed, 70 years earlier, until the new Beis Hamikdash starts to be rebuilt, is exactly 70 years. The rabbis don't want to write this as a proper book. What's their reason? Don't want to make the Megillah of Esther a proper one of the 24 books of Tanakh. You never understood that part. I'll tell you right now. They were worried that this is going to increase anti-Semitism. They were worried that you're sticking it into the eyes of the non-Jews, how Haman was wicked, and how Esther had her identity, and then, there's a Jewish king. It's going to remind the enemies of the Jewish people, that Darius, the king of the Persian Empire, who's currently giving permission to build the temple, is actually a Jew. And this will make people jealous of the Jews and will inspire more hate towards the Jews. And therefore, their suggestion was that in order to minimize the fallout of the Purim story and of the death of the enemies of the Jews and the death of Haman and of his sons, and let's keep a low profile, let's stay quiet, be happy. We have a Jewish king. We have permission to build the Beis Hamikdash. We're allowed to return to the land of Israel. Why should we remind these enemies about their downfall? It will just stick it to them. It will just make them more angry and more jealous and make them hate us more. And therefore, we're better off. No reason to remind them. We're better off to just play quiet, keep it low, and just be happy with our temple without writing a proper book to remind the enemies of how they were destroyed by the Jewish people. Shashta. That's what the rabbi said to Esther. You know what Esther responds to them? She didn't agree with that response. And Esther responded very wisely. You know what Esther says to them? She says to them, it's hinted, everything I'm telling you is hinted in the words of the Megillah. She says to them, all of these, everything I told you, she said, you won't know this is an answer unless I tell you. Now that I tell you. So the king, Achashverosh, made a tax on the people. And behold, these things are written in the official chronicles of the king of Media and Persia. It's a one line stuck in there. This tax that the king made and all the story, it's written in the books of the kings of Media and Persia. And that's the second to last verse of the Megillah. The last verse, if we all say together, Mordechai the Jew was the advisor of the king, etc., etc. These few words, right before we finish the second to last verse of the Megillah, is her answer to the rabbis. And she says to them, the non-Jews know this story. They're already written down in the chronicles of the kings. They have it. We're not telling them what they don't know. The question is, what will the Jews know? So to be worried about the non-Jews knowing about their destruction, they have it written down. They know. What we need to worry about is, what do our children know? What will be the story that we tell? Don't worry about them. It's more important that we tell ourselves the story. As you worry about anti-Semitism, it's going to happen anyway. They have it written down anyway. You're not going to stop by not writing down our story. You're not going to stop anti-Semitism. You're just going to stop the future of the Jewish people. And she was effective. The rabbis actually rewrote the Megillah because it's very interesting. In the Gemara, I think in Bava Basra, I may be wrong, somewhere in the Gemara, I think Bava Basra, it says that the Megillah of Esther was written by the men of the Great Assembly. Not by Esther, by the Anshe Knesset Hagdolah. Now, which one is it? If you read, here it says clearly in the Megillah that this was written down by Mordechai and Esther. And the Gemara, it says it was written down by the men of the Great Assembly. So you say that she wrote the first draft and they sort of say edited it. Some say they didn't change one word. They just rewrote it in the land of Israel. Because Nevu, and it's a whole long discussion, is also handled by Yecheskel as well, a similar idea where Rashi writes that you can't have full prophecy outside the land of Israel. And since this was written in exile in Persia, it was lacking prophecy. By rewriting it in the land of Israel, that gave it a certain level of kedushin, of holiness that it didn't have from being outside. So her exact word, not even the edited, polished version. The edited version was what became the official Jewish version. But I want to say something fascinating. I should have said it a minute ago. I just missed it for 1 minute. I forgot to say this. When Esther told them this is written in the formal chronicles of the kings of Media and Persia, who wrote the chronicle? She did. This is why, fascinating thing, which you're all familiar with, we don't find the name of Hashem anywhere in the Megillah. Now, the very, very famous explanation is why don't we find Hashem's name in the Megillah? Because God was hidden, and just like his name is not there, God was hidden, etc., which is all true. But that's the deeper answer. On the more technical level, why was it written without God's name? Because when Esther wrote the book, she wrote it to be written and read by the non-Jews as well. She wanted this to be part of the chronicle and part of the history of the non-Jews. But she didn't want any non-Jewish nation to read it and start to switch the names of the gods. And take God's name and put a different name there instead. So to prevent God's name from being misused in an improper way, she wrote it without writing God's name in order to make sure that God's name wouldn't be, misplaced or changed for a different God. But Esther tells the rabbis not just they know about it. You know why they know about it? Because I already entered it into the formal record. It's already, in Congress, is what's it called, the Library of Congress. It's already on record. I've already put it into the formal records of the Persian government. You have too late, guys. It's already on record. Yeah, the only one who knows is the Jews, because the non-Jews, they already have it on record. And she sort of played them. She forced them. By ratifying this, it's already published. It's already a published book. So then they rewrote it in the land of Israel with the Kedusha, with the holiness that comes from prophecy in the land of holiness. Some say they edited it. Some say they literally word for word. They didn't change one word. Just gave it the Kedusha of the land of Israel. And they made a book of Tanakh. So, no, that's the Gemara says. But we find that with Yecheskel also, with the book of Yecheskel also, it says Yecheskel didn't write it. Even though, why didn't he write it? It's his prophecies. Because he was outside in exile. So therefore it's written in a way that it's, because it's in exile is a time of concealment of God. So it's lacking Ruach HaKodesh. Every divine prophecy. Every one of the 24 books of Tanakh are written with divine prophecy. So to imbue it with the level of prophecy, they formally wrote it, but it's her book. It's her book. Here's what I want to end off with. So what's the point of this? It's an unbelievably powerful message. Esther is an unbelievable heroine. But Esther teaches us exactly what it means to have Jewish pride. Not that she flaunted it. When she had to hide her Jewish identity, she hid it. It wasn't like she was just like a loudmouth. But she only did that because Mordechai told her to. And she recognized God had a plan. But the moment she realized that the way to save the Jewish people is by standing proud as a Jew, she went public. And then she went public all the way. She didn't just say, I'm a Jew. She put it into the formal records. She didn't try and hide that her son Darius was Jewish. She formally entered it into the chronicles of the book, into the kingdom of Persia. And this is an unbelievably important message for us to recognize that the ultimate answer to anti-Semitism and the ultimate answer to fighting the hate that we sadly encounter all over today again, institutionalize and normalize, the way Haman institutionalized and normalized hate of the Jews back then, is not by hiding our Jewish identity, not by trying to keep it low and not put into the face of our enemies how powerful we as Jews are, but the exact opposite. By making it an eternal holiday that we should celebrate. The non-Jews should see us celebrating our victory over our enemies. They should see that we're rejoicing for future generations because of the miracles God did for us against them. That we read this chronicle, we read this book, we remember it, we're proud of it. And that is the answer of Esther to the rabbis back then. And that answer is just as true, just as powerful, just as relevant for us today. It's not trying to hide and try and keep a low profile, but to be proud of our strength, to be proud of our gift that God has given us, our many gifts, and to walk around with this unbelievable sense of pride and mission. Av Yisrael Chai. Okay, my friends, good night. And now, yes, questions. How am I commemorating? Saul is the best. So Monday night. Next, this is actually, thank you very good. You make an excellent agent. Yes. So next Monday night there will not be a class, obviously, because next Monday is the fast of Esther, and we'll be reading the Megillah here. So the fast ends 6:47. So 6:00 will be Mincha. 6:45 or so will be the reading of the Megillah. We're gonna do it in the social hall. We're gonna make the social hall the shul because we're gonna set up for the part of the main room. 6:45. 6:45. I have 5:20 in the morning or something. It was in the email. But 6:45 Monday night shall come for Megillah reading. There'll also be like a kids program also at the same time for the younger ones. And after we'll have some hamatash, some l'chaim and all that, some light refreshments. Tuesday, there's a Megillah reading at 8 o'clock is davening. 8:30 will be a Megillah reading. 9:30 will be a Megillah reading. And 5 o'clock will be a Megillah reading. 5:30 will be the unbelievably fun Purim and the Shuk party. It's going to be a lot of fun. And you shall join us. In addition, on Purim, you should make sure to give charity, which are the 4 mitzvahs, to give charity specifically to people in need. Any charity I get during the day goes 100% to families that need it. And to give at least 2 gifts of food. One gift of at least 2 food, to a friend, Mishlach Manot, to the Megillah, and of course to have a feast, to have a party. So make sure you do those mitzvot. So next Monday night won't be classic, we'll be here hearing the Megillah. And then, Bezrat Hashem, if all stays on plan, the week after that, I'm going to be in Israel. So that's the plan. We'll see what happens with Iran, but God willing, as of now, we're going to be in Israel. So I will definitely be keeping you all posted on Facebook from Israel. I won't think it'll be a full hour-long class like this, but there'll be, mini classes and mini inspirations. So stay tuned. Okay, happy Purim, everyone. Thank you very, very much. 6:45 Megillah. 6 o'clock Mincha. 6:45 is Megillah. 6 o'clock is Mincha. The afternoon service. At 6:45 is the Megillah reading. Okay. Laila Tov, Jessica. Laila Tov, Corinne. Thank you. Good night, Jillian. Good night, Ella. Great class. Thank you. Alice, thank you very, very much. Shikoch to you. Thank you, Corinne. Amisal Chai. Exactly. Thank you, Louise. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Thank you very much, Carmen. Thank you, Jessica. I'm glad you enjoyed the classes. Hello, Christine. Laila Tov from New York. I hope you're surviving in the snow over there. Okay. Laila Tov Lori. Laila Tov Murli. Laila Tov Jessica. So relevant. Absolutely right. So relevant. You are 100% correct. Laila Tov Heidi. Laila Tov Maria. Laila Tov all of you. God bless you all. Only blessings for good things. Thank you for the love. Happy Purim to everyone. Bezrat Hashem. Good night, Ravi. Happy Purim, Bruce. Happy Purim. Thanks. A second. Happy Purim to all you. Wish me happy Purim. Yes, let's go. Look at some happy Purim going. Eugenia, Laila Tov. Good night, Ravit. I'll stay on for 1 more minute to say happy Purim to a few more people. Happy Purim it is. Chag Purim, Chag Purim, Chag Gadol HaYehudim. Feeling the energy, David? You getting into the energy? Good. Okay. Any final happy Purim messages? Here's Hector. What do you say, Hector? You found the video of scuba diving?
This is a scuba instructor that went to, Lipschitz.
Yeah, I'm going to end the stream. Good night, everyone. Good night.